All right, welcome back to another segment of It's Just My Thought book review. It's your boy Dark Warrior, and today I got 5 heavy hitters for you, plus the cherry on top. Let's go. Okay, book number 1, copyrighted in 1957, The Black Bourgeoisie by E. Franklin Frazier. Boy, did this send shockwaves during the middle class. Middle-class black people had an issue with this book particularly because he really started to signify the division between the classes of the poor African American and those who were doing well for themselves. There were many other organizations that were being developed to signify who was better than others. The primary denominator of such a mentality was anyone of European descent. And so those who were mixed with European descent, your lighter skinned people, were starting to establish these small fraternities like the Blue Vein Society or the Brown Society. And of course we know about the brown paper bag test. These fraternities and these sororities were establishing their own communities to push out darker skinned people and those who were not on their level financially. So particularly down the South, lighter skinned people were beginning to go to their certain churches. They started to get away from the AME churches, and they started going into the Presbyterian and the Protestants and the Catholic churches because they was trying to get away from the ideology of anything dealing with Africanism in the church. So what E. Franklin Frazier started pointing out was these communities were then migrating not only from the South with this mentality of having European descent, they started going further up north. Well, lo and behold, they met another class of bourgeoisie people who were my complexion or even darker. But the difference was those people had what? Money and status. So they weren't necessarily concerned so much about how light-skinned you were or how much European descent you had in you, but rather not was you somebody. So this class goes into this, this book goes into great detail on the black bourgeoisie then and now. What was written in this book in 1957 is still relevant today. That is a classism between those who are middle class and beyond, and those who are not so well-to-do financially. Please get this book, The Black Bourgeoisie by E. Franklin Frazier. Book number 2, copywritten in 2005, Dr. Joy DeGruy Leary, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. How significant is this book? From a scale of 1 to 10, I'm definitely going to give it a number 11. It is extremely important of anyone who is of darkly melanated of African descent, who is a product of the transatlantic slave trade, and who has been a product of institutionalized slavery or institutionalized racism, whether it is going back from the Jim Crow laws, the Reconstruction period, the direct link to slavery on the plantation. She goes into great detail on why that has been such a traumatic experience that it still lies into the DNA of anyone of African descent to this day. She goes extremely in detail about what Carl von Linnaeus was doing in his creation of racism and different racism and how they were going about justifying on pushing the African to the bottom of the totem pole. She goes into great detail on Thomas Jefferson's mentality and his approach to anyone of African descent. They went to extreme measures to make sure that you were going to be in a servitude position forever. And because of it, it created what we call PTSD. So those who have been in some type of experience, whether they have seen someone get extremely injured through gunshot or whatever, you have some symptoms of PTSD. Now think about how in depth that PTSD may be when you've seen generations of your people continuously ice skate uphill going through all of these fights with a system that has never deemed you as being human. Post-traumatic slave syndrome, copyrighted 2005, Dr. Joy DeGruy Leary. Put it on your shelf. If you have it on your shelf, read it again, share it with your family and friends. Book number 3, copywritten in 1954. This Guyanese American historian really sent not only a shockwave, but it's just a Mike Tyson punch to the gut of anyone who had believed that the Greeks was the originator of all philosophies and was the originator of all civilization. Dr. George G.M. James. What can I say? There has always been this construct in our educational system that anyone of African descent had done absolutely nothing to contribute to civilization. When he wrote this book, he not only refuted this idea, an idiotic idea that I may, really emphasized, but he gave detailed notes on where the Greeks were getting their information. So much so, he, just like Dr. John G. Jackson, used quotes from even eyewitnesses of any of the Greeks in which they told you that they were the students of people of ancient Kemet, or what we call modern-day Egypt. The Africans, the people who built up that civilization. Stolen Legacy is one of these profound writings that sets you on a wave in which, even if you have been under a 12-year to 16 years doctrinated educational system, will at least make you start thinking twice into understanding your contribution or the ancestors of you and their contributions. What a great book. But the sad ending about this, although the book was absolutely beautiful, and I need you to really purchase this book, and I recommend it strongly, what was sad is the book was copywritten in 1954. Dr. James ends up dead in 1956, shortly after the book has been copyrighted. So there's some question marks behind that. How someone can be so young. He was a professor at Arkansas. And for someone to be so young, to die so soon, right after he had written a book to refute any of these ideas that Europeans came into Africa and built up a civilization that they in fact still didn't even understand. So if you built the civilization, why are you trying to decipher it and then try to take and then steal all of the artifacts and take it back up to Europe? And then you couldn't even replicate what you said you built in the first place in Europe. There was no such thing as what we call philosophy in Kemet. But we'll get into that in greater detail later. All I need you to do right now is get Stolen Legacy, George G.M. James, copyrighted in 1954, banger. This will really set somebody's brain on fire when you read this book and regurgitate the information. All right, book number 4, copyrighted in 1994, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, the legend. Egypt, the child of Africa. Where do we begin? My intent is to never take away the contributions of ancient Kemet, because it's one of the greatest civilizations ever. But what this book did that was extremely profound is to take you in a reverse chronological order on where people of Kemet arrived from. This is evidence in which is needed to refute the idea of some Asiatic group of people or someone of European descent, establishes ancient Kemet. Reason being is because it is duly noted in this book that the Cometians were migrating from Central East Africa at the tip of the Happy River, what we call the Nile River. And as they're migrating up, they're beginning to establish great civilizations in Nubia, modern-day Sudan, Kush, what we call Ethiopia, and of course, Egypt itself, or what is known as, what I refer to as being Kemet. He takes you on a beautiful journey, detailed journey, showing you that their origins date so far back into the deep heart of Africa. You have no choice but to admit that they were of African descent, building up that civilization. And it wasn't until after they've built up the civilization and after they've already established his whole foundation, then you have a group of people coming out of their darkness, migrating into the area, and then taking, not giving, taking information to help establish their civilization. Egypt, the child of Africa. Dated 1994. Ivor Van Sertima did a great job editing this book. Dr. Runoko Rushidi has some hand in it, and many others. This is imperative for you to put on your bookshelf. Please get this. Egypt, the child of Africa. All right, book number 5. The Nile Valley Contributions of Civilization, copywritten in 1992 by yours truly, Anthony Browder. And outside of the fact that it's a great book, let me start by saying that mine is autographed by Anthony Browder, and I appreciate that. I've spoken to Mr. Browder on several occasions. I really admire his work. He's doing some fantastic things with the Asa Hillier Project. Definitely look him up and see all the ancient tombs in which he's discovered and has been putting in with the last 30, 40 years. He sat at the foot of all of the greats in his process, so in learning ancient Kemet. But besides all of that, why do I recommend you getting this book? This is one of the first books that I purchased when I started learning about ancient Kemet. And no, I am not an expert on ancient Kemet. There are a lot of people that know a lot more about Kemet than I do. I have my areas in which I'm stronger in than others. But I will say that I have a significant amount of information on the bookshelf that supports the fact that ancient Kemet is our history. Ancient Kemet is your history. And ancient Kemet needs to be, the story and the history of ancient Kemet needs to be rewritten so that you go back into understanding that the mathematics, the sciences, and the writings, the ideal of construct and government and law, which was called Mayat at the time, was all created by the African and no one else. And as long as you understand that, you are rewriting and you are reorganizing a institutionalized mindset that has always favored the idea that Europeans have done all of this, which is furthest from the truth. But I digress. What has he done in this book? He took, not only does he use all of these great pictures to tell the story and use comparisons. For an example, on page 95. We go to page 95. I remember that specifically because when I really started looking into this book, that had always stuck out to me. And he started showing you that modern day religions, specifically of Christian and Judaism and Islam, much of what they were what is being taught and believed is plagiarized out of Kemet. Remember, religion, specifically Christianity and Judaism and things, they do not come into existence until after the Hellenistic period. There is no such thing whatsoever up until the Hellenistic period when the Romans and the Greeks were in rulership of Kemet at the time, which is long after Kemet has already been, is on the downfall at that point. You talk about what, the 27, 28 dynasties, like 30 of them? I mean, come on. So you're Johnny come late. But what they did was, they started learning the Medu Neter, the writings that's on the walls of Kemet. And they started deciphering it, and they started taking away bits and pieces of the story to add in to their teachings. Okay? If you look on page 95, okay, here you have the comparison hymn. And I'm going to put this up, so don't you worry about this, so you can see it. This is the comparison hymn of Akhenaten's hymn that was written in 353 BCE, but then you show Psalms 104, and that is written in 1000 BCE. So those are one of the examples in which he was showing you that all of our history was being plagiarized for modern day religions and ideology. Of course, he talks about the before there was American history, there was Black history. You can see all of the paintings on the walls in Kemet of the dark complected people and some of the lighter skinned people or brown skinned people. They're now in the tombs whitewashing it, even to this day. Under Arab rule, they've completely just almost eradicated the identity of the African there. Because remember, when the Arabs come into ancient Kemet, they know it's not theirs. They looked at it as being paganism. So what did they begin doing? Destroying it. And they started building mosques on top of the holy grounds of ancient Kemet. So if it was your ancestors, and if it's your your civilization, why are you destroying it? Why are you building on top of it? If it's your ancestors, because guess what? We know it isn't. But what he was doing in this book is he's breaking down all of the contributors who was coming into ancient Kemet. Those who were honest about it was giving their honest opinion about what the Egyptians were looking like, or people of Kemet was looking like. And he also was showing you in writing those who were deliberately bringing racism to destroy the ideology or the identity of ancient Kemet. There's so much to be expressed about this book. I can't get all of it into detail. We'll be here for hours talking about it. But I want you to get Volume 1, the Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. This has to be on your shelf. Not now, but right now. That's book number 5. All right. Well, you know how I do. There is no way I'm going to give you 5 books to put on your shelf without always giving you a cherry on top. Coming in on the top off my book review on It's Just My Thought. Copywritten in 1978, the introduction by the late great John Henry Clark, my favorite historian of all time. The Iceman Inheritance. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Michael Bradley came in with the Iceman Inheritance and his honest opinion, and he was of European descent, revealing to you why the actions of Europeans are still similar and of the same as the Europeans then. He goes into the theory that it is of environmental upbringing that has developed a mindset. Just like when Dr. Joy DeGruy Leary talks about the post-traumatic syndrome and how the slavery has taken its toll on the DNA of the African, well, guess what? Same thing goes with those of European descent. It is a background. It's a history in which you always believe that I have to take by any means necessary everything that I see, and if I can't take it, I'll destroy it. And if I can't destroy it, at least I'll continue to try to manipulate it. Okay? In the Iceman Inheritance, Michael Bradley talks about coming from the cold conditions of Europe in that ice age, and when there's no food and there's lack of resources to build. Okay? They then develop a nature of destruction. Just that simple. Okay? And so when you read this book, and believe me, let me tell you this, Dr. John Henry Clarke is not going to do the introduction of any book if in fact he doesn't agree with it. So let's go ahead and get that off. Let's get that out there right now. If you see any book in the introduction as Dr. John Henry Clarke, there is no reason for you even to doubt, hesitate, or to doubt that the book is going to be a good read. The prehistoric sources of Western man's racism, sexism, and aggression. So much so that they even had those same attributes to their own men, their own women, their own children. Everyone, it was just open season, on anyone, no matter if they look like me or not, to take over and control. And you can continue to see the behavior till this day. Cherry on top, Iceman Inheritance, Michael Bradley. Get this book. All right, well, there you have it. The 5+1 book review by your boy Dark Warrior. It's just my thoughts. Remember, all I want to do is get you to open up your eyes, start expanding your library, start reading more about Africana studies. If you're interested in any of these books in which I've done a quick preview for you, just click on the links in which I have provided for you at the bottom, and you'll go directly to Amazon and you'll get the book sent to you within 5 to 7 business days. If you are an Amazon Prime member, such as myself, you'll get it within 2 days. But if you have an Africana bookstore in your local area, support them first. Give them money first. If you can't, then click on the link and get your book. Next, as you can see, I'm rocking my Africana postage stamp t-shirt. If you haven't checked out that video, I have a 2-part series where I'll demonstrate an array of beautiful Africana stamps, whether they're going from East Africa, West Africa, African American, the Caribbeans, you name it. I also provide sales for those, and I'll attach that link for you too. Then what I want you to do is download my app, the Dark Warrior Perspective app. It is free, and you will be getting Africana history on a daily basis, quizzes, you name it. It's all right there on the app. It's in your Apple and your Google, so it's provided for everyone on both platforms. So no further ado, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Get these books, put them on your shelf, and continue to read and learn thyself. Peace.